What's up guys, it's Art with Mr. A, back at it again with another art video. We're going to pick up where we left off last week with the ceramic coil pot, part 2. Now last week we talked about how to cut the nugget, which is a basic way to attach coils to the base of a coil pot and blend it together. So this is a quick review. When we cut the nugget, we remove that little piece that overlaps and form a perfect circle. But you might be wondering, how do we make this into a full-formed piece of art? We want to actually apply this thing to a template. So what I'm going to show you here is how to use a simple piece of paper and scissors. We fold it in half, and it's almost like making a Valentine. You know how you draw half of a heart on a folded piece of paper? I have a top and bottom line and then unite it with a curve. With my scissors, I can cut this thing out, and you're going to see very quickly how I can actually plan out the exact size and shape of our pot. Once I remove the cutout, if I open it up, that's going to be an exact template of what the pot's going to look like. But if I use a dotted line on the baseline of that piece, I can fold it and then I have a freestanding template that I can build my piece from. The next step is to kind of center it underneath that base that I just created. If I look at it from the side, you're going to see if I stack coils directly on top, I can go up, out, or in. Now the cool thing is by changing where we place the next coil or the next circle of clay, we're going to be able to compound that into the shape that follows our form. Now you're going to see me here adjusting it, maybe spreading out that last circle. Remember that clay is flexible and we can take that to our advantage. So I score and slip one coil at a time, being careful to match that template. You can always move it out of the way, but you'll see me go back and forth when I'm cutting the nugget, blending it out, all those things, and they always return to the template. It's a really great tool to make sure that you're on track. So notice how this ring is slightly larger, and when I blend it out, I want to make sure I use the inside first so I don't create pockets for germs when I close it out. But then I blend the outside the best I can, so when I do measure it on the template, I can see whether or not I'm actually matching the curve that I need. Always go back and double check to see if you're on point. Remember, this is a process. There's nothing wrong with adjusting your design as you go, but you want to make sure that you have a plan, and if you do change it, they're deliberate. Now the difference between an amateur and a pro is that the pro sticks with it no matter what. If you find yourself getting into a part where you're not really sure about, try taking an action instead of kind of straying away and starting over. Try to work through the difficulty, because maybe this particular pot might not turn out the way that you want to, but what you're going to find is over time, that next pot that you do, you're going to be able to take knowledge of the mistakes you made and create, new insights. That's where knowledge comes from. It's the foundation of mistakes and learning by doing. So don't be afraid of not being able to follow the template, especially the first time, but I'll teach you some cool new tricks after we add all the coils in order to fix any of the mistakes you might have made by applying the coils out of order. One thing that I want you guys to look at me doing is every time that I add one coil, I take the time to blend it out. If you add, say, 3 or 4 coils at a time before blending and you go back and do the blending, the problem is each time you blend, you're kind of smashing the walls of the pot. Now that's not necessarily a problem, but the thing is that as we build it up one coil at a time, you might not be taking into account when we smash that clay, it actually also makes the walls thinner and can make the pot taller. So think about it. When we pinch clay, we're actually creating that clay like pressure to ooze out the sides. What that translates into is a thinner wall and a taller pot in that area where we pinched it. So really take the time to think about how the thickness of the pot is going to be affected when you blend those things together, because we're kind of scraping clay from the wet coil onto the rest of the base to make a clean seal. Now you'll notice me using a blue tool here. This is what I call the sweet potato chip. The sweet potato chip tool is actually called a finishing rubber. You can use it as a blending tool, especially in this stage, but we're actually going to see that again later on when we actually smooth this thing out, so it looks like it was made by a machine. So again, we're nearing the top, we're using this template, but what you're going to notice me doing is really making sure that this stuff gets blended out. Each circle that I put on there with the coils is nice and even. Now that just about does it when we're completing that template. What's left to do is start smoothing this thing out. So as an extension of blending, we're going to use a little bit different set of tools here called the sweet potato chip or finishing rubber to actually blend this thing out. But as you can see, it's looking pretty good. Start off with the sweet potato chip. You're going to create sweeping motions with that soft rubber tool to make sure that we get any of the clay burrs or little, chunks of clay that are stray from the wooden tool you might have been using for blending. But that rotating motion is going to really make this thing easy to use. I use the rotating surface of the banding wheel to make this really easy. If you don't have one of these, that's okay, but you'll notice if you can put it on something like a piece of wood or even like a CD, something that'll slide and like spin easily underneath, it'll make it a lot easier so you're not having to kind of put all this pressure on holding the pot. I pay special attention to the edges first. I want to make sure that that circle, that once it's smooth, you can see the imperfections and clean those up. Now, smoothing is a back and forth game. You're not going to get it on the first time around. You have to kind of smooth it out in one direction. You might notice that that accentuates a problem with another part. That's no problem. We just want to attack the areas where there's an imperfection. I would say it's safe to assume 4-5 rounds of back and forth of smoothing before you get it to that level where it looks like a machine made it. Now, if you really like that processed look, this isn't the only way to make something. This is my inner neat freak coming out and saying, hey, if we're going to spend all this time, let's make it look nice and sharp. It doesn't mean that making something that isn't super smooth and polished doesn't mean that's not artwork. I want you guys to think more expansively about that. Maybe we want a more organic texture. The reason I want to show you this is because it takes the most effort, in my opinion, to be deliberate about your textures. Whether you're smoothing it out to make it look like it was made like a machine, or you want it to emulate something like dirt or bark or something like that, as long as those things are intentional, you're going to get more satisfaction and you're going to have more confidence in the artwork you put out into the world. So don't be shy, commit to the effect you're looking for, but try to pursue it directly. Even if it's a creative accident, make sure that you're intentionally looking at that and saying, okay, I'm really comfortable with how this turned out. Now, to finish it off, I'm going to make sure that I mark this with my initials or my full name, depending on how you want to label this. If you notice that flat bottom now gives a date there, it's always helpful to have a reference when you look back years later and you see how far you've come. So this thing is turning out pretty nice. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to comment below and don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to stay tuned for more videos. If you have questions or suggestions of what you'd like to see in the future, please hit me up via the comments below. Thanks.